At the time of making this video, it's currently October and Halloween is just around the corner. Often, this time of year is full of costumes, one of the most common being a witch costume. Some even like to call October the season of the witch. But why is Halloween associated so closely with witches? And where did witchcraft come from? Hey lunatics, it's Lady Luna, and today we're taking a deep dive into a subject I've loved studying for years and years, the history of witchcraft. I do love learning all about different areas of the occult, including witchcraft, paganism, Wicca, and other magical groups. If you're new to my channel, my name is Lady Luna and I love making videos on all sorts of mystical and metaphysical topics, so be sure and subscribe and hit the bell if you like topics like this. Believe it or not, the practice of witchcraft or magical occult practices stems all the way back to the first recorded human civilization, the ancient Sumerians. Some believe that the knowledge of magic and casting spells came from the fallen angels mentioned in the Book of Enoch, a non-canonical book of scripture. The events of the Book of Enoch match up with the Sumerian creation myth almost on an eerily similar level. In the Book of Enoch, chapter 8, it states, "And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armoros the resolving of enchantments, Barakajal taught astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven." Most magical occult groups of people have always had a few practices in common. Number 1, most believe in the existence of many gods and often have a pantheon of gods within their specific belief system. This was true of the ancient Sumerians, who believed in gods such as An, the god of the heavens, Enlil, the god of wind and storm, Enki, the god of water and human culture, and several others. We see this polytheistic belief system carried on throughout history through a wide variety of cultures, each with their own specific belief system and pantheon, such as the deities of Roman, Greek, Celtic, Norse, and many other pagan pantheons. Records of self-proclaimed witches stem all the way back to biblical times. Many may remember the common verse in Exodus 22:18 of the Bible, which states, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." However, the translation of this has undergone much speculation over the years. Some believe it was actually meant to be translated as saying, "Thou shalt not suffer a poisoner to live." And some also believe this specifically referred to a well poisoner, or someone who puts poison into a well or village water supply. Another common mention of witches in the Bible is the witch of Endor, mentioned in 1 Samuel chapter 28. This was when Saul inquired of the witch of Endor for revelation. After all of these events in the Old Testament, we do have a vague idea of witches and occult magic, starting around the 3rd century BC. The first pagan tradition to be restored was that of the Druids from Celtic societies in Britain. In those times, a Druid was a member of the learned class among the ancient Celts. They practiced magic involving astrology, nature worship, honoring of a Celtic pantheon of deities, doing group rituals, celebrating the seasonal changes of the year, and in some cases, many Druids were believed to make sacrifices, even those of human beings. Nowadays, however, Druid beliefs and practices, while still upheld and practiced by some small groups, are still different from those of the Druids of old. They no longer practice human sacrifices, and often don't do sacrifices at all anymore, thank goodness. The practices of the Druids and other Celtic pagans are actually where we get the basis of today's Halloween celebrations. It all started with a pagan celebration known as Samhain that was usually observed on October 31st. Be sure to watch my video on the strange history of Halloween in order to learn more about that. When I received the latest update on my heritage from Ancestry.com recently, I was very surprised to see that I'm actually more Celtic in my heritage than anything else, whereas before my heritage had come up 97% English. So there's a high likelihood I myself have Druids in my ancestry. Super cool. Another notable find was that I most likely am related to one of the victims of the Salem witch trials. Her name was Mary Parker, and like most of the victims of that awful time period, Mary was not even a witch or a pagan. She was falsely accused. Such times of horrifying witch hunts not only existed during the Salem witch trials in 1693, but also long before that in different areas of Europe. This was due to emergence of Catholicism in Europe and their condemnation for other non-Christian spiritual practices. They very often equated witchcraft with devil worship, even though most traditional pagans don't even believe in the devil. For example, Germany had one of the longest spans of witch hunts, lasting from around 1300 to 1850. Such witch hunts were absolutely brutal, and for monetization purposes I won't go into all the details of them, but as most of us know, the penalty for even being accused of witchcraft was unspeakable. Over time, nearly 100,000 people were put to death because of this. Aside from all this tragedy, the real pagans and witches still have passed down their traditions even to this day. In fact, it's nearly impossible to count every pagan tradition that exists. Many people think of Wicca when witchcraft is mentioned, but actually, Wicca is only one modern tradition under the wide umbrella of paganism, and not even all Wiccans identify as witches or vice versa. So what is it that these witches of old actually believed about magic? Well, the first thing to note is that magic and witchcraft and the occult is nothing like in Hollywood movies. Things don't magically appear out of thin air, witches can't really fly through the sky on a broomstick, and not all witches are evil. Many witches I've met in real life are very kind. Since there are many different ways to practice witchcraft, some witches choose to use it for good, for evil, or for both. Using magic only for positive reasons is often known as the right-hand path, and using it for harm is known as the left-hand path. Many things you'll hear about witches from fiction are based in reality, but are more of a metaphor. For example, just before the witch hunts became widespread in Europe, it was a common practice among many pagans to use a drug called ergot. This was made from the mold that grew on rye bread. When in high doses, it could be lethal. Smaller doses of the drug were used as a powerful hallucinogen and made into a special ointment that witches rubbed onto the handle of a broomstick. They did this to rub up against the broom and absorb the drug in a way I can't fully mention here on YouTube, but you get the idea. So you can see how witches riding brooms and flying are actually just an amusing metaphor. But the magical practices of witches and the occult in ancient times actually goes far deeper than this. Witches were known as wise women or wise ones who practiced folk magic, herbalism, divination, and who had the ability to mentally travel to other dimensions or worlds, such as using astral projection. And no, not all witches were women. Druids and other pagan sects were made of both women and men. There are various methods by which pagans gained their power in magical rituals. These included the worship of nature, the petitioning of patron deities, aligning with certain planets and constellations, or practicing more structured ceremonial rituals that could involve all of these methods. One other notable time in history that shaped the kind of witchcraft that's practiced today is the emergence of a spiritual belief system known as Cabala or Cabala. This began in 1569 when a man named Isaac Luria from Jerusalem compiled a system of Lurianic Cabala, the first Kabbalistic tradition that we know of. However, in 1666, a rabbi named Shabbatai Zevi from the Ottoman Empire, who declared himself to be the Messiah, created his own interpretation and practice of Kabbalah and a Kabbalistic magic system. This system taught that instead of following the old Jewish traditions and following the commandments of God, instead, people must actively sin in order to bring about God's kingdom on earth. This belief is often referred to as redemption through sin. Shabbatai Zevi eventually converted to Islam, but his beliefs and practices were revived and carried on by another man named Jacob Frank in the mid-1700s. Because of these movements, the Lurianic Kabbalah became a synthesis between both pagan teachings and also older Gnostic elements of Judaism. These traditions of the Lurianic Kabbalah were carried on into more modern traditions of ceremonial magic today, particularly starting with a former Catholic priest from England in the late 1500s. John Dee was known as a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, teacher, occultist, and alchemist. Impressively, he was also the advisor, magician, and court astronomer to Queen Elizabeth I. John Dee was close friends with a man named Edward Kelly, who was a lawyer who stood accused of necromancy, which in this context means using dead bodies for divination. Together, these two claimed to have communicated with several otherworldly entities and supposed angels who aided them in learning an angelic language known as Enochian. This supposedly was the pre-Hebraic language. They used this language to practice a special code for casting spells and communicating with other dimensional entities. This practice is still used today in ceremonial magic groups, especially within secret societies. For example, it's believed that this Enochian style of magic was used by well-known occultist Aleister Crowley, and also the Golden Dawn, of which Crowley was a member for a time, before creating his own occult tradition known as Thelema. Unfortunately, John Dee and Edward Kelly soon met their demise when the so-called angel suddenly commanded them to start a practice of wife swapping. After they went through with it, they never heard from that spirit again. So as we can see, there have always been many different kinds of witches, pagans, and occult traditions throughout history. Pagans of old worshipped the old gods. More structured traditions later on were based on ceremonial magic and direct contact with otherworldly entities. And in modern traditions today, such as Wicca, created by Gerald Gardner, the worship of nature is common. Contrary to what some may believe, not all witches are evil people. Some only cast spells of love and light in order to better their circumstances, much like the law of attraction today. Other witches choose more of a middle or left-hand path, where they aren't opposed to cursing others or using magic in self-defense. Some believe this type of spell casting is evil, some do not. It all really depends on who you ask. Nowadays, there are some religions merging within pagan traditions, creating entirely new belief systems. Christian witches are even a real practice that exists now, believe it or not. Either way, the practice of witchcraft is about as old as humanity itself, and the many beliefs and traditions within it never fail to leave me in awe. No matter what you believe, I always find it to be a good thing when we study things that seem a bit strange or scary at first. You may find something fascinating and full of significant history and cultural tradition, even if you don't plan on practicing any of it yourself. We can all learn from one another's traditions in so many different ways. With that, I will say thank you for watching, everyone. Be sure and push the like button if you like this video, and also subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a future video on my channel. If you made it this far, comment the secret word of the day, which is enchantment. Happy Halloween, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!